thanks for tuning in today with us online at the meeting place. My name is Tony, and I have the privilege of being the pastor around here, and I'm just so grateful that you're choosing to have us be part of your week, whether you're watching live on Sunday or picking up later in the week. I'm glad that you're prioritizing making some time to being able to be part of these discussions and conversations and messages, all geared towards helping us find and follow Jesus. And so today you're in for a real treat. I'm actually going to be traveling this week, and so for the next 2 weeks we have one of my favorite people. He actually he's a leader, he's a pastor in Minnesota, but from the very beginning of the meeting place, before we ever had our first Sunday, this was a guy, I didn't even know him, and someone gave me his name and said, you got to talk to this guy. And so I call him up, I'm like, hey dude, could I come get on a plane and just fly out there and just learn from you, ask you questions, see your church? And so he's like, absolutely. And I go and I spend a few days with him. We became great friends. He has an incredible church over there in St. Michael, Minnesota. And so I'm excited to be able to share Jeremiah. He's been with us before via video in settings like this. And we were actually supposed to, a couple months ago, he was going to be in person with us, but COVID. And so we're hoping that in 2021 we'll be able to have him out in person with us. But today, next week, Pastor Jeremiah is going to share his message. Today it's specifically, it's a series that they did just recently, or a few weeks back, called Ducks in a Row. And today he's going to talk about how you can maximize your time, and specifically how you can use your time to find your purpose. We all want more purpose in life. And so I'm really excited to share this message with you. So check this out.
Now, I have here today, we're starting a brand new series called Ducks in a Row, and maybe you've seen one of these before. This is a game called Bop It. And basically, if you've seen this, you pretty much just bop it and you follow the instructions. So we're going to give this a whirl. I tried it once before. Here we go.
High score, 16.
That was me.
Bump it. Twist it. Pull it. Hammer it. Bump it. Hammer it. Twist it. Oh!
All right, I got the wrong one, but you get the idea, right? 16 was my high score. That was not nearly as good. But here's the deal. Oftentimes in life, the point of this game is you just have to keep trying to do the right thing at the right time. And I think a lot of times in life, we end up unintentionally living our life like a bop it. It's very, very reactive and not very proactive. And what I mean is we're simply trying to keep up with our schedules, keep up with the demands that are on us and our schedules and the places we need to be and the things we need to do and the things we're responsible for. And what happens is that we end up unintentionally living lives that are very reactive and not proactive. I think about my own life and the different roles that I play, and I want to be a good husband. I want to be a good dad. I want to be a good pastor. I want to be a good employer. I want to be a good friend. There's all of these different areas of life. And oftentimes my life ends up looking like a bop it, like I'm constantly just trying to react to what's next instead of being proactive. And that's what this series is all about. How do we get our ducks in a row so that we can be proactive? Maybe you've heard that expression before. Maybe you've even used that expression before. And it really refers to this idea that I'm going to be proactive. I'm going to take care of certain responsibilities now so that I can enjoy something later on. I got to get my ducks in a row. And so throughout this series, we're going to tackle some very practical things in our lives, common areas that we need to get our ducks in a row. And the first one that we're going to tackle is this area of our time. Now, to kick us off, let's do a little home survey here. I know we can't see you, but maybe you want to raise a hand or hit a like or whatever it is that you're doing, or maybe play if you're in a room with family, play amongst yourselves. But I know we're online during this season, but try to play along. Raise your hand or give us a like or give us a shout if you could say yes to any of these questions. The first one is this: I've cut through a gas station parking lot to avoid stopping at a red light. Raise your hand if that's you. Give us a like if that's you. All right. Number 2, I don't like to take vacations when there isn't something to do. Like this whole idea of going on vacation and doing nothing does not appeal to you. Maybe that's how you're wired. Another one, number 3, I frequently look at my phone for no reason at all. Oh, okay. Maybe you even get the phantom buzz in your pocket from time to time. How about this one? I think most of us, if not all of us, will probably raise our hands or give a like for this one. I often switch lines because I think the one I'm in is too slow. Now, here's a follow-up to that. I believe God makes whatever line I'm in the slowest. Yeah, right here. That's what I think. Number 6, I often can't sleep. Even though I'm tired because my mind won't shut down. And then number 7, give us a like or raise your hand, play along with people in the room. People who talk slowly irritate me. Just raise your hand, give us a like, yeah. I'm in the other camp, I'm in that camp. I can't believe that people ever listen to podcasts or audible books at regular speed. I listen to everything in double speed. Now, I understand why most of us live jam-packed lives. It's because of something called FOMO. You've probably heard of this, the fear of missing out, right? We see the highlight reel of everybody else's life on social media, and we look at our boring lives, and we think, wow, I need to do more. I need to accomplish more. I need to look at them. They're out there. They're doing that. Party here, vacation here. I need to try that new thing. My kids need to be participating in that. Life is always reminding us what we're missing out on. So it's beach vacations. It's blemish-free skin. It's muscles. It's energy, an invitation, followers, friends, a date, romance, happiness, purpose, right? Our constant angst keeps us from being able to truly live because we're living that bop it life. And so what we want to do is, instead of living our life always reacting, how do we put our ducks in a row so that we can say, okay, we're going to live this life the way God designed for us to live it. And consequently, when we're living reactively, it really has a huge effect on the way that we spend our time. On the way that we spend our time. And unfortunately, we end up suffering the consequences. See, time really, really matters. And here's why. Number 1, time is the most valuable asset in your life. It is the most valuable asset in your life. Think about it. We talk about time like we talk about money. Think about the words that we use that we associate with time that we often associate with money. We say things like, I'm spending my time, or I'm investing my time, or I'm wasting my time. These are terms that we use when we talk about money. We actually do believe that time is our most valuable asset. And here's an interesting thought. Here's how you know time is really, really valuable. Think about this. At the end of my life, maybe at the end of your life, you will probably spend a lot of money trying to buy more time. Think about that. Maybe you've even seen that play out in the life of a friend or a family member. Some of you have been there where someone you loved was at the end of their life, and you realize that you or a family member or a friend or someone in your family spent a lot of money trying to buy more time for someone they love. And of course we would do that. Why do we do that? Because that's how valuable time is to us. In fact, when you think about it, you would actually say it like this. Number 2, your time equals your life. Your time equals your life. Your time is your life. How you spend your time is how you spend your life. And regardless of how much money you have, or how much success you have, or how many friends you have, whatever you are doing with every single second of every day is how you are spending your life. That's a sobering thought. Because that immediately causes us to take stock and evaluate, how am I really spending my time? Because how I spend my time is how I spend my life. And if you're a follower of Jesus, or if you are here today and you've connected with us and you're exploring what you believe about God or what you believe about Jesus, I think a really important question for us to ask is this: how does God see my time? How does God see time? What if we could spend our time and spend our lives in a way that is in sync with the way that God created the world to work? And you may not even be a church person or a follower of Jesus. You may be at a place in your life where you're just trying to figure some of this stuff out. But here's what I can tell you. You and I are not the first people to wrestle through this concept of time, and we won't be the last people either. And this collection of documents that we're going to read from today, it comes to us as the Hebrew Scriptures. It eventually gets bound together with what the eyewitness accounts and followers of Jesus wrote in the first century. And maybe you'd say, okay, the Bible isn't really my thing, but there is actually some wisdom in these documents, some very practical wisdom that can be very beneficial to you if you're willing to explore it with an open mind. And to help us understand this question, we're going to look at something that was written several thousand years ago by a guy named Moses. Now, here's why Moses brings clarity to this topic. Moses lived to be 120 years old, and he started out his life as a rich, spoiled brat growing up in the house of Pharaoh. See, Moses was actually adopted into the house of Pharaoh's daughter. And so Moses grew up in wealth. He grew up in a world where you could have whatever you wanted, anytime you wanted it, because he grew up as a member of Pharaoh's daughter's family. He's the grandson of the most powerful man in the world. And somewhere along the way, Moses looked at the Hebrew people who were suffering and enslaved, and it started to bother him. It started to bother him so much that he felt he needed to do something about it. And so he lived with this tension. Do I stay in my life of comfort and ease and wealth where I get everything I want? Do I stay in this life of pleasure? Or do I embrace purpose? Knowing that I don't know what that outcome will be. I don't know how that story is going to end. But do I leave all of this behind and embrace purpose that has no guaranteed ending? And the reason that you may have heard the story of Moses, maybe you watched Prince of Egypt, maybe you've seen the Ten Commandments, the reason that movies have been made about his life and the reason that his story has been told is because he chose a life of purpose over a life of pleasure. And there's something about that that resonates with us as human beings. There's something about that that resonates with you when you think about it. Anytime someone leaves behind everything to do something significant, there is something in us as human beings that it just captures our attention. Because outside of everything else, here's what you and I know. There is a deep longing inside of us for our life to count for something. One of the biggest fears that we have is associated around this idea that we might live our entire life and actually have our life not count for anything significant. And so whenever someone leaves everything to do something significant, it captures the attention of the human spirit. There's something about that we go, man, there's something just attractive about that. And the word that we use for that is purpose. It's this word purpose. And so here are some lessons that are connected to time that we learn from Moses. And the first one is this: there is no purpose without context. There is no purpose without context. We're going to read some verses today from Psalms. These are actually written by Moses. Now, I know oftentimes if you think of the Psalms, we think of King David. And that makes sense because King David wrote most of the Psalms. But the reality is, a few other people actually wrote some Psalms. And Moses wrote the earliest Psalm. And they're not placed in the order that they were written. But Psalm 90 was written by Moses. And because the language can be a little bit poetic, I'm going to give you the bottom line, and then we're going to dig it out together. And basically, here's what he says. There is no purpose apart from context. There's no purpose without context. When it comes to how we spend our lives, when it comes to how we spend our time, context is everything. So in order to see your life, in order to see your time correctly, you have to see it in its proper context. When you do that, it gives it purpose. Think about it like this. Have you ever opened a drawer at your house? Many of us have this drawer. You probably call it the junk drawer. Have you ever opened the junk drawer? And you open it up and there's like 13 different charging cords to 13 different devices. And you pull one of those suckers out and you're just like, man, what is this? You have no clue. And really, you're just like, why does this thing exist, right? What is going on here? And then someone in your family or your roommate or one of your kids goes, oh, that's the charger to such and such. And all of a sudden, it makes sense. You're like, oh, okay, got it. Like, we better hold on to that. Really, this thing that you didn't know what it was, it had no purpose until someone told you what it was, until they gave you the context. And once you connected it to the context, suddenly that charger that you didn't know what it was before, you probably could have thrown it out, it suddenly took on purpose. You're essentially asking, when you ask, what is this cord? You're saying, why does this exist? What is this for? What does this do? Why is it here? And the answer to all those questions is context. As soon as someone gives you the context and connects it to what it's actually for, it provides purpose, right? It takes on purpose because it's connected to something else. And so in this psalm, this is what Moses does for us. He connects purpose and context as it relates to our lives and as it relates to our time. He says, okay, if you want to know why you exist, if you want to know why you're here, how to view your time, how to view your life, then you've got to understand the context. And so here's what he writes in Psalm 90. He says, Lord, through all the generations, you have been our home. You have been our home. Even though we've been a nation for hundreds of years, we've never had a land to call our own. And so really, God, you have always been our home. We find our context in you. Wherever we dwell, if you're there, then we're home. He starts off that way. And then he moves into verse 2. He says, before the mountains were born, before you gave birth to the earth and the world, from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. We find our home in you, and before anything was created, you were there. He says, you are God from everlasting to everlasting. Moses is saying this, okay, God, if time were to stretch out in either direction, if time were to stretch out eternally that direction and eternally that direction, God, you are there. There is no beginning for you. There is no ending for you. You don't exist in time and space the way that we think of it in our human minds. God's eternal existence is the context for our lives. Whenever you were born and wherever you were born, you are born within the context of the God who was here before you and the God who will be here after you're gone. And Moses says, you are God from everlasting to everlasting. Our lives are here, and we find our context in you. Then he says this, you turn people back to dust, saying, return to dust, you mortals. This is the most Gandalf thing in all of the Bible, okay? You read this and you're just like, what is going on here? What Moses is doing is he's poetically drawing a contrast between the mortal lives of human beings and an everlasting God. He is attaching that statement to the one before it. He's saying, from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. In other words, you're eternal, but we are mortal. This is a statement that emphasizes the one before it. Then in verse 4, for you, 1,000 years are as a passing day, as brief as a few night hours. Moses says, again, he's connecting this to time in our lives. He's saying, God, you know what? 1,000 years go by here on earth, and it's like a day for you. In fact, it's even shorter than that. It's like a few hours. 1,000 years, a whole millennium goes by here on earth, and it's just like an afternoon for you. Our lifetimes are like a blip on the radar screen compared to you. You sweep people away like dreams that disappear. They are like grass that springs up in the morning. In the morning it blooms and flourishes, but by evening it is dry and withered. Like dreams that disappear, he says. Have you ever woken up in the morning and you know you had a very vivid dream, and then you wake up in the morning and you're trying to remember what that dream is, but you've already forgotten the moment you woke up? Moses says, God, that's how fast our lives are compared to you. You can actually, again, he's using a second illustration to emphasize the fact that our lives are short. I mean, you can plant fresh sod in the morning and it can already start to wither by evening. And Moses says that's what our lives are like in the context of an eternally existing creator God. And we don't even need Moses to tell us how fast time is going and how short our lives are, do we? Because Facebook reminds us of that every single day with its memories feature, right? It's unbelievable. The memory pops up in your feed and it says, this happened to you 5 years ago. This happened to you 9 years ago. And you're like, that was 9 years ago already? How did that happen? In fact, you've heard people say that time goes faster the older that you get. I can tell you, that's not just an emotion. That's actually a scientific phenomenon. Isn't that interesting? When you were a kid, it feels like Christmas was never going to get here, right? It was always so far away. And when you get older, it feels like Christmas is happening every time you turn around. It feels like Christmas is always right around the corner. It's Christmas again already? Are you kidding me? When you hit a certain age, you stop thinking in terms of how old you are, and you start thinking in terms of how much time you have left. And because of that, because of the way that our brains process information, it actually, physics can explain this, it actually starts to feel like time is moving faster the older that you get. And if that's not bad enough, this week someone told me about deathclock.com. You can check that out for yourself. You can type in a couple of details about yourself, and it will tell you when you're going to die. Just a little fun website for you to have a little fun with this week when you have a little time to kill, right? You're like, wow, I'm so glad I'm tuning in today for this depressing message. If our life is like the grass that withers away, if our life is so short, like 1,000 years on earth is like a day to God, it's like an afternoon, then what is the point? What are we doing, right? And that is really the question. I mean, that's the question. That's the question of purpose. That's the question, why am I here? What is the point? And purpose is connected to context. And Moses is saying, if we're not careful, we can miss it. Our lives are so short that if we're not careful, we can miss what the purpose is. And we can just live our lives, and we end up becoming spectators in our own lives. In fact, a couple of verses later, he gives us a picture of what a life disconnected from purpose actually looks like. He says this, 70 years are given to us. Some even live to 80, but even the best years are filled with pain and trouble. Soon they disappear, and we fly away. That is a description of a wasted life. 70 years, 80 years, that's a description of a life where they never figured out context. They never figured out purpose. What is this life for? What is this life for? Why am I here? And then Moses turns the corner. And he says, there is something that if we knew it, there is something that if we could experience it, there is something that if we would acknowledge it, if we understood it, it would actually provide the context that answers the question of purpose in every single one of our lives. Now, it's very, very poetic how he says this. Here's what he says. If only we knew the power of your anger, your wrath is as awesome as the fear you deserve. That clears it up, right? Sounds like a great life verse, right? Put that on the mirror, read that every day. But remember, this is poetry. He's using hyperbole, and he's using imagery to get this point across. And as the main contrast that Moses is making is between a God who lives eternally, everlasting to everlasting. You are God, but our lives are short. You are God, you exist eternally. Our lives here on earth are this short thing. That's the contrast. And so here's literally what he's saying. If we could see God, if we could see God in all of his power, if we could see God in the vastness of who he really is, we would give him the reverence he is due. It would provide the context for us. If we could catch a glimpse of the true context of our lives in light of who God is from everlasting to everlasting, we would lean in and we would align our lives around the purposes of God because we would automatically give him the reverence that he is due. But here's the challenge. We don't see God in all of his power. So we often miss the context, and consequently, what ends up happening for us as humans is we try to create purpose out of things that are here in this life. Money, success, pleasure, material possessions, comfort, etc. And if you were to focus and invite his presence into your life and catch a glimpse of who God is, it would change everything because the context of our itty-bitty human lives is the God who lives from everlasting to everlasting. To find purpose is to connect to significance. Significant connection between creator and creation. If we only knew, Moses says, if we only could see, if we could only open our eyes to that reality, it creates the context for which our lives find purpose in the grander scheme of God's story. In fact, you could say it this way: God created you on purpose for his purpose. God created you on purpose for his purpose. God created you on purpose for his purpose. Moses says, you are a fool if you think that if you live 70 or 80 years, you can find purpose in this short life outside of the context of God's everlasting story. God is so big, and our lives are so small by comparison. 1,000 days here is like an afternoon for God. And if you think that you're going to somehow find purpose and significance and meaning out of your small life outside of the grander context of a God who is eternally existing, it's never going to happen. And that's why Moses says, if we only knew how vast, if we only knew how eternal, how expansive God is compared to our lives, it would change everything. So, in light of all that, here's what Moses says next. In light of this contrast, verse 12, teach us to realize the brevity of life so that we may grow in wisdom. Wisdom is the ability to connect the dots in life, to understand how the decisions I make today affect tomorrow. Understand the reality of life in a broad perspective and how life fits together. And Moses says, when you recognize how brief your life is and how short your life really is, it actually gives you a new perspective in which you're able to see your life in the context of God's everlasting and eternal story. And you begin to live and make decisions from that perspective. In other words, when you realize the brevity of life, you will gain a greater understanding of the context of your life, which is God and his purposes in the world. That's amazing. Now, about 1,400 years later, this would be written by the author of Hebrews to describe this decision that Moses made. Moses says, okay, I'm going to pursue that purpose. I'm going to leave Pharaoh's household, and I'm going to go and I'm going to live a life of purpose. And the author of Hebrews writes this about Moses' life in Hebrews 11. It says, by faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to be mistreated along with the people of God rather than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as of greater value than the treasures of Egypt, because he was looking ahead to his reward. Why did he give up comfort and ease and wealth and security and power and live a life of wandering through the wilderness and helping a people who were enslaved? It's because he understood that the purpose of his life wasn't found in the context of things here in this life. Moses understood that the purpose of his life was found in the context of God's everlasting story. Over the last few years, that's what we've tried to do. And so let me ask you this question. What about you? Where are you finding your purpose? Where are you spending your time? And consequently, where are you spending your life? Where are you spending your time? And as a result of that, where are you spending the bulk of your life? As we wrap this up, let me give you 4 really practical ways to make your life count. Number 1, determine who is most important. Let me give you a hint, okay? This is pretty easy. If you're married, your spouse should be at the top of that list. If you've got kids, they should be at the top of that list. Do the people who know you the best love and respect you the most? So who are the people in your life who are most important to you? Who are the people in your life that you want to have a significant amount of your life spent with? Number 2, determine what is most important. What are the things that you want to accomplish in this life with God's help? What are the things that you want to give your time to? What are the things that you want to give your attention to? Because how you spend your time is how you spend your life. So what are those things that at the end of your life you will have spent your life on, and determine if those things are worth giving your life for? And then number 3, determine your role in God's kingdom. You were created on purpose for God's purpose. Because the purpose of your life is connected to the context of God's everlasting story, your life has significance. You are valuable. There is no such thing as an accidental person, okay? There's a lot of accidental parents, but there are no accidental kids. And you were created with a role to play. You have a part in God's story. Now, here's the reality. All of us play a different role. I happen to be a pastor. Some of you are great teachers. Some of you make a lot of money and finance things that move God's kingdom forward. Some of you are absolutely working behind the scenes and making things happen that spread the message of God's love. Some of you are incredible neighbors and friends and coworkers and mechanics and plumbers, but you do it in a way that reflects the value of God's kingdom to every person that you come across. All of us have a different role to play, but all of us have a significant role to play. What's your role in God's kingdom? What does that look like for you to reflect the kingdom of Jesus, the love and the way of Jesus in whatever your role is? Because your purpose in life is found in the context of God's everlasting story. Where is God active in our world, and where can you get involved? And finally, number 4, give your time to those things. Give your time to those things. Every yes is a no to something. Think about that. Every time you say yes to something, you have to say no to something else. Every time you take on something extra, every time you take on something that's outside of your core values, who and what and your role in God's kingdom, every yes to something is a no to something else. And for many of us, honestly, managing our time is less about developing the skills needed to keep all the plates spinning, and it's a lot more about developing the discipline to let some of them drop. And focusing in on who is most important, what is most important, and what is my role in God's kingdom. Who is most important, what is most important, and where is my role in God's kingdom? And then give your time to those things. Give your time to those things, and your life will take on purpose in the context of God's everlasting story. I love what the Apostle Paul writes later on. This last verse says this: be careful how you live. Be careful how you live. In other words, don't just let life happen to you. Be careful how you live. Be thoughtful, be attentive. Don't live like fools, but like those who are wise. The implication is to live reactively, to let life just happen to you, is to live foolishly. But to live wisely is to be careful how you live. Make the most of every opportunity in these evil days. Make the most of every opportunity. In other words, wise people, they are able to see the broader context. They see my life has purpose in the context of God's everlasting story. And as a result of that, I'm going to live life carefully and attentively, and I'm going to make the most of all the time that I've been given. Who is most important to you? What is most important to you? Where is your role in God's kingdom? Spend your time doing those things. And friends, you were created by God and for God's purpose. Now, if you're here today and you'd say this, I've never heard that before. I've never understood why I was created, and I don't want to wander through life. There's a few things you can do. First of all, maybe you'd say this: hey, I want you to know that this message, the message of the Scripture, is cover to cover. Is God is building a family, and He wants you in it. And if this is the first time you've heard this, your life has value. Your life has purpose. Your life has meaning in the context of who God is. And you're invited to be a part of God's family. And if you've never said yes to that invitation, I want you to know we have a God who wants to bring you into His family. He wants to forgive your sins and make you a part of his family, his son, his daughter. Others of you, maybe you'd say this as we close in prayer here: God, just give me the wisdom to know what plates to stop spinning. Give me the courage to say no to some things so that I can say yes to the things that are part of your story. Let's pray together. God, thanks so much for being here with us today. Thank you that in spite of the fact that we're kind of spread all over the place here, we're still the church. We're still the body of Christ. And so we pray a couple of things. There's those of us who would pray, God, I want to say yes to the invitation to be a part of your family. Forgive my sins and adopt me into your family. Make me your son, make me your daughter, and help me to put my trust in you, to follow you with my life from this moment on. And then, God, we also pray this. Give me, as I reflect on this talk, as I reflect on this message, I recognize that sometimes my time gets away from me because I don't give it the proper context. And so give me the discipline to maybe say no to some things so that I can say yes to those things, who and what are most important in my role in God's kingdom. Give me the wisdom to know how to apply this, and give me the courage to do it. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, thanks so much for joining us online. We hope to see you back next week for part 2, Ducks in a Row. Have a great day.
Well, I trust that you found today's message helpful, inspiring, encouraging. And do me a favor and really take the time to consider what is your next step. Based on what you just heard, what's a good next step for you to take? And then once you've processed that, maybe you've got to ask God what that is. Maybe you ask whoever you watch this video with, or just consider it. Take the time to think, what's my next step? And then once you know what it is, I dare you to do it. I dare you to do it. At the Meeting Place, we're never about perfection. We're all about progress, because we know that one step at a time helps us become the person that deep down we really want to be. And also it helps us become the person that God has designed us to be. So what's your next step? I dare you to take it. Okay, a couple quick things here before we jump out of this and go about our day. One is there's an update video floating around. If you haven't seen it already, make sure to go find it, and it'll give you an idea of what TMP looks like through the remainder of 2020. And then specifically within it, I want you to know this because we're really excited about it. On October 14th, it's a Wednesday night. That's our first chance again to gather in person for what we're calling Weekends on Wednesdays. Wow. Okay, Weekends on Wednesdays. Wow. And so it's not going to be your normal Sunday morning service. It's going to be a little bit different flavor, a little different vibe, and but it's going to be so good. It's actually going to be a live recording of the service that will be able to be put out each and every weekend. So you'll be able to be kind of in the know before anybody else by being part of the live recording. And then immediately following the live recording each week, we're going to have a Q&A after party where you get to be part of that. Consider what questions you have to take the discussion a step further as we all fix our aim on walking and following Jesus. So I want to invite you to be part of that with us. The best way to let us know you're coming, because we kind of have to get an idea of who's going to be there, so we have an idea of how we do this whole social distance thing. But let us know, or if you've got questions, let us know at hello@tmpspokane.com. hello@tmpspokane.com, and we'll get you everything you need to know to participate with us on Wednesday nights. So I love you guys. I miss you. Next week, Jeremiah will be back. I'll probably be, back in some way like this, but we'll see you there.